Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. This episode, I am very excited to report that I will be speaking with action legend, foundational superhero icon, Michael Jai White, my first favorite superhero. I'm sure he hears about it all the time. It was the first superhero I had a poster of on my wall in my room. Back when he was the titular character in Spawn. He is a unbelievably accomplished martial artist. He is an actor, he is a director, he is a screenwriter. He has done it all at one point or another over the course of his prolific, decades-long career. You may know him, like I said, from Spawn, or perhaps from Black Dynamite, or maybe Why Did I Get Married, the Tyler Perry film. And I think we can even spot him in Insecure, in those True North insets. We're going to touch a little later on in the conversation about Michael's deftness with comedy when it folds into his screen appearances, a man who is known for his stoicism, a man who is known for his action. But right now, we are going to get into his upcoming film with him, The Commando. Michael Jai White, is there anything else you would like to know before we get started and before we dig in to a little bit of character talk with you?
I think you covered quite a bit.
Well, I think it's important for people to know the breadth of what you have done in your career. Your litany of credits is so expansive, and you do comedy, you do action, you do drama. We've seen it all from you. And so I want to make sure that we're letting the people know, like, there's a lot of material that you can draw from throughout the course of your extensive filmography.
Well, thank you.
Well, okay, so today we're going to talk about a sort of like a collection of characters that you found yourself in, that you felt resonated with you, watching them growing up at various points. And a couple of ones that you cited were like the works of Jim Brown.
Right.
You mentioned Pumping Iron with obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you mentioned a TV movie called Rich Man, Poor Man. And yeah. I wanna know who specifically in Rich Man, Poor Man was it that you were like, you know what, that guy's hitting a chord with me?
Well, I saw Rich Man, Poor Man, and a man named William Smith, the first Will Smith,
if you will.
He played a character called Falconetti in the miniseries, and he was a bad guy actually.
I love
but that. It was something about his charisma and how tough he was and his build and the look of the guy that made me say, I like that. I want to be like that. And he was my favorite character. To me, it was the Falconetti show, And then I kind of found out that the guy was a Navy SEAL, and he just had badass. He just reeked of badass. And I would see him in Westerns and everything else, found out he was a Navy SEAL. He spoke like 5 or 6 languages. And I was like, I knew there was something more to that dude,
That's a really interesting thing about like the job that you do. And, in presenting a character, like the ones that really leap off the screen, those ones that really stick with you, you can just feel that there's something more going on with that person than everyone else around them. It's a fascinating kind of just like unplaceable charisma, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what drew me to them, like Jim Brown and Fred Williamson, people like that. I said, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
And, to grow up to actually befriend people like this. And, and Jim Brown for a while, he was like my surrogate dad. When we played chess, when I finished Black Dynamite, the first person I showed that movie to was Jim Brown in his basement, he and I together. Wow. And I got his stamp of approval. It was like getting the stamp of approval from my own father.
Yeah.
But it was something about Jim Brown when I learned when he was playing football, he did a thing to where when he would be tackled, he'd get up slowly, like as if he were injured, right? He played a psychological game with everyone. And so, you think he's injured, and next snap of the ball, he runs over somebody again. He just kept doing it. And it was a thing of him fusing physicality with intelligence. Jim Brown was my hero growing up, because him being a civil rights activist and just, using his power to make things right. And, he had his issues. He wasn't squeaky clean, but he represented himself honestly and powerfully. I grew up wanting to be like that. And eventually our paths did cross, and I ended up, working with him. He had a platform called Amer I Can, which I joined to help people that were coming out of prisons, and this big reentry program, and this thing that helped out a lot of people from the inner city with job skills and life skills that he was behind. But yeah, I mean, I saw myself in the movies that he did, and the one other person was when I saw Pumping Iron for the first time, and I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. And his confidence just leapt off the screen. And so that was another person I identified with. And so I think these images of powerful, strong men who were bright, they were beyond their physicality, just leapt out to me. And I said, I think I wanted to be like them.
Now, and how old were you when you started encountering Jim Brown's work?
Oh, I must have been 12. I mean, like watching him on screen.
Yeah.
I'd see Slaughter and some of the early movies he did, 100 Rifles. And one of my favorites was 3 the Hard Way. Yeah.
I watched that recently for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
That was, it's amazing the cool that carries over from a movie like that. It's like, this is timeless. This doesn't matter what's trendy. This doesn't matter what the zeitgeist is. You just feel it. You feel the characters in your bones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, Jim Brown, I mean, man, that was my dad in my mind, before I ever met him. And I'm like, that's what I wanted to be like. And so even with, eventually when I did Black Dynamite, that's who I drew from more than anything.
And you were a screenwriter on Black Dynamite as well.
Yeah, I wrote the movie.
Yeah. You that was you pulling multiple duties on that one. And now I wonder, like, being a character whose job it is to, like, so often being characters whose job it is to sort of evoke, like, that similar sort of response in people. Like, they're, when we see Michael Jai White come across the screen, like, we have that kind of reflexive reaction to be like, this guy can handle shit. Like, I just know when this guy shows up in this situation that this is someone who can handle whatever is put in front of him. And I wonder what, with the through lines of someone like William Smith, and then with someone like the characters, seeing so often in Jim Brown, and then even Arnold in Pumping Iron, what do you find, like, as you've grown through, your career, and what is that sort of cell of something that undergirds that power that you saw? Is it confident? Like, obviously these are physically large men, but, like, is it a confidence? Is it a certainty in oneself? Like, what do you think it is that is really, like, the interior architecture of that feeling that you were getting from them, and that you are sort of responsible for conveying to us as viewers too? Like, where do you build that from with your characters?
Well, I think what it is that you see yourselves in that person. Even when I was younger, I didn't know I had those abilities. Of course, I don't, it's like the chicken versus the egg thing.
Totally.
But what was it? Something that was inside of me that I see represented?
Yeah.
Or did that inform how I was going to be? It could be a little bit of both. But yeah, I was quite, I had the certain leadership abilities and qualities since I was a kid. And I guess that's why I kind of identified with them to some degree as well. And I always wanted to, even as a fighter, I always was a cerebral type of martial arts or fighter. And, I thought the chess game was the fascinating part of it. And to have the physicality was subsequent to that, And I think that's really how, where I stand now. It's the same thing. And people look at the shell and they look at the outside, but it's a representative of what's going on in the inside, not the other way around. Some people, they try to build the shell first to compensate for what's not inside. Mm-hmm. But what, the heart and the drive that you have, that you're driving from inside, sometimes, that informs what everyone is actually seeing. And with those people, I think that's what I saw. I saw something deeper with them. They weren't just brutes. They were right. To me, really unusually balanced human beings.
Okay, that's really interesting. You're the first person to bring up like an antagonist character that we've had on this show. So I want to get into that idea of that balance and the like kind of the range of identifying with the baddie in the case of like Rich Man Poor Man with William Smith. Was that a part of it at all? Like, was there something about like because the villains are always the ones that get to play with the most charisma. Like to be a truly transcendent villain, you would have more charisma than you. That's the hard job of the hero, is to out charisma the villain that everybody kind of feels like, I don't know, I'm kind of with this guy's deal. Like I get why people are following him on his agenda of world domination or breaking into someone's home and holding their family hostage and stealing all the money in the floorboards, like in the Commando. You've got to believe that the people marshaling the bad guys is worth following. So what was it about a heel character like William Smith's in Rich Man, Poor Man that like was the badness kind of a part of it? Or was that just something that was ancillary to the fact that he had so much more going for him in this role?
It was him. It was the confidence emulating from him. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was like that guy could say a few words and I'm like, that's a badass. That I don't know what caused him to be that, but I want to find out, and I was quite young when this came out, and I didn't know was it an acting thing or whatever, but I just identified. That is the first person that I could recall that transcended the screen that I saw. I said, whatever that's something I identify with. The first one was William Smith. And I got to meet him like at a comic book, like a signing thing. And I couldn't really express to him, like, I'm sure he was like, yeah, okay, kid, or whatever, but it's like, man, like when I got to meet him, like, I didn't know he was going to be there. And then, it was kind of, I don't know, bittersweet, but, not many people was around him. And, it was just me. I think I just annoyed him for about, 10, 15 minutes, just gushing about like what he meant to me. And he's like, yeah, okay. He was in his 70s, at the time. Like, I'm sure and it's probably going to happen to me too. I'll be signing, like, there'll be like a few spun photos and I'll be like 80 something and there'll be one person that comes up and says, I remember you.
Yep. Like, walking up saying, you were my first favorite superhero, Michael Jai White. Which I appreciate you graciously fielding at the start of this, of course. And another thing about that aspect of balance too, to respond to like that power and charisma at he's an early age, you're like, this guy just feels like a badass. And then to grow into a career where like you become an archetypal badass yourself, and you along the way you meet heroes of yours and you meet icons and inspirations. Where did that awareness of the balance start with you? Like, did you always kind of have a keen sense of it when you started getting into martial arts, perhaps, or into your screen career? Or was that something that you had to develop over time? You're like, you know what? Now I finally realize what the sort of trick is to this. Like all these years in, I know what the trick is, and it's this balance.
It's weird. I had these weird, I don't know, like eccentricities or this like, maybe, I don't know if you call it superstitions, but I always thought everything had to be balanced. Okay. Like, this is the first time I'm ever even going to say this. It was like really strange. But if I walked up a staircase starting with my left foot, I'd have to end with my right foot. Okay. And sometimes I would go back and re-step. Like, and if I scrape my left shoe, I have to scrape my right shoe. It was a weird thing that followed me. It was like this OCD thing I had, but it's like, I felt like everything had to be a balance, right? And so growing up and then being into this industry, thinking that I service my fan base by just being as honest and balanced as I possibly can. I service my family by being as honest and balanced as I can, warts and all. I feel like, okay, then I don't have the arduous task of working too hard because I'm already that. You know, I behave as, if I go into a movie like, you know, the movie I'm promoting now, like Commando, not much work has to be done because I don't really think that's much different than who I am. Like, okay. And I believe that when I was a kid and I looked into the eyes of those people, there was an integrity that was there. I think there's an integrity in old Hollywood, the Clint Eastwoods and all these people who like pretty much were very close to who they were. And so it didn't take a lot to believe them because Clint Eastwood, I know, would go upside your head if you said the wrong thing. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So you know
you're going to get smacked by Jim Brown.
Exactly. There was an honesty there. And then I'm going, hey, if I'm the person, that I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not in a lot of these situations. No, I would risk my life to save someone who was innocent. That's who I actually am.
I've watched some interviews with you where you've really talked about having a very like almost overwhelmingly strong sort of sense of justice in that way.
I do. That's why I was almost a cop several times over. Even as an actor, I was in line to be a reserve cop because I felt it deep in my DNA that's who I am. I'm someone who believes in justice and right. And even though I thought maybe I'm a little bit too much of a Boy Scout or whatever this industry,
sure.
I stuck with my guns. I never made a bullshit friendship. I don't lie to anyone. I so don't have to work at anything. I'm like earlier.
The work is in here. The work is the interiority.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real comfortable place to be when, sometimes in the interviews, if you want to, if you don't want to answer this question or if you want to stay away from this, just let me know. I'm always like, what do I have to hide? So that's kind of like, and so with my work, I feel like it's never been anything like seduction to cheat on something or, I work out. I get a chance to like, and people say, oh, is it hard, training? And I'm like, I'm supposed to. There's kids who look up to me, Yeah. I'm not going to, shortchange that. I mean, I fought hard to be here. And the reason I'm happy is because I know I deserve it. I worked hard and I continue to work hard.
Yeah.
So it's me training to do what I was born to do is a right. I don't consider very much being hard. Like really, I'm playing make believe. And so it's a great job, but if I wasn't doing a little bit more with my status, it wouldn't make sense to me. So I do a lot of things on my own to try to leave the planet in a better place than I found it. And that's just what I'm supposed to do, And so to be able to entertain folks and be able to do things that I think matter and pick movies that actually not only entertain but has something to offer, plant a seed here and there. In this movie, there's a lot of people who are these unsung heroes who are, who are struggling with PTSD and all of that. And these people are your neighbors, and to make you, recognize that. And in my African American community, where, we don't grow up with that kind of, that ethic of going to help, going to find help for, me being the big tough guy, going out to, in the movie to get help.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll encourage other people to do the same thing.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, but we have got so much more to get into with Michael Jai White. Stay with us.
I'm Lisa Hannawalt.
And I'm Emily Heller.
9 years ago, we started a podcast to try and learn something new every episode.
Things have gone a little off the rails since then. Tune in to hear about
low-stakes neighborhood drama,
gardening,
the sordid, nasty underbelly of the horse girl lifestyle,
hot sauce,
addiction to TV, and sweaty takes on celebrity culture,
and the weirdest, grossest stuff you can find on wikipedia.org.
We'll read all of it, no matter how gross. There's something for everyone on our podcast, Baby Geniuses.
Hosted by us, two horny adult idiots.
Hang out with us as we try and fail to retain any knowledge at all.
Every other week on Maximum Fun.
A man was walking along a beach which represented his life. At his feet were two sets of footprints, his and God's. But looking back down the beach, the man could see that in the hardest parts of his life, there was only one set of footprints. So the man said to God, "Why is there only one set of footprints when times were hard? Where were you?" And God replied, "My precious child, I was in my car, listening to the Beef and Dairy Network podcast." The Beef and Dairy Network podcast is a multi-award-winning comedy podcast, and you can find it at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola. My co-host this week is Michael Jai White. He has played Spawn in the original live-action adaptation of the comic book Spawn. He starred in Black Dynamite, Exit Wounds, The Dark Knight. Let's get back to that conversation. He's got so much to say. No more delay. One of the reasons that I'm so enamored of action cinema and that I'm such a genre film fan is I'm a big fan of like the consideration of sort of like the historical arc of the action heroine. And as far as I've like sort of assessed, the modern action heroine exists born out of blaxploitation films. Like actresses like Pam Grier, movies like Coffee. Like this is the archetype that starts to define the action heroine as she will go on to exist till the present and has obviously changed and, evolved over the decades. And then for you to make a movie like Black Dynamite and to come to know Jim Brown and then to respond to his movies and to be able to take the roots back to such an incredible strain of just female representation on screen to its roots in blaxploitation films and black genre films of the 1970s, like it kind of begins there. And so for you to talk about like, for you to say like you're the African-American community as well, like for you to grow up so immediately responding to these characters representing a strain of power and confidence on screen, like that feels like it to me. It's so integral to what I want to talk about on this podcast because it's like, yes, these are the things that, like you said, we're conditioned not to go seek help, and systems where others like myself, white folks, might be able to go seek help, you don't necessarily have that luxury. And so to be able to retreat into cinema and see these models of sort of power and charisma and confidence, there's such an incredible weight to that. And I find it to be the most endlessly exciting topic of conversation. I'm so glad that these are the characters that you've brought to talk about today.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely with the African-American community. There's when you talk about PTSD, it goes way back, just
about as far back as you can go.
Yes, but yeah. So yeah, to be somebody who folks follow. I think it's very important to show that to use that as a tool, to seek help, and because for so long, it's been ingrained in us that that's not strong. It's just the church. That's about it, Right. So yeah. And
so with that, kind of a long, like you said, a sort of long standing need in your life to have things sort of in balance and sort of in proportion to one another. And then having that very strong pull toward a sense of sort of like righteousness, a sense of justice, was pursuing martial arts and responding positively to that feeling of like power and control that came off these characters you really identified yourself in, was martial, like you said, chicken and egg. did that lead you towards something like a martial arts, like those components of you, or did martial arts sort of hone those things in you?
I was lucky to go toward martial arts, and I found something that would guide me for the rest of my life. Now, I got into it for other reasons, like I was insecure, and I was building my armor. But along the way,
that shell, working on that outside shell.
Yeah, along the way, and being a sensitive kid who wanted to, protect my fragile heart, my heart of an artist, that I didn't realize this, but I wanted to combat those things that threatened it. But and then I became this, fighter and this, kind of monolith in a way. And for a while, I was being celebrated for how tough I was and everything else. And my instructors fell into that as well. Oh yeah, he's, because being a male-dominated society, we started putting all this, attention toward the pugilist. But missing the biggest message of martial arts, which is overcoming obstacles. And our biggest obstacle to overcome is ourselves, right? So for a while, even though my instructors kind of celebrated me as a fighter, I was being less of a martial artist because that was only one component of the martial arts, right? It's kind of like with religion. You can be taught the right things to do, but the people who are in charge, they may, justify anything they want in their brains to do whatever that, that reptilian brain of theirs might have. Yeah. But it's the doctrine that should supersede everything else. So it was like the doctrine of martial arts, being a balanced human being, not just being the tough guy. That's the benefit of martial arts, not the fighting. It's about the person, you get galvanized to become that will, that spirit, that will that says, I can do what I put my mind to. And dare I say, the martial arts is the closest thing to becoming a superhero that I know.
Oh my God, I would not argue. Right. I would not argue.
But that's if you really focus on what it's supposed to be, which is supposed to, you're supposed to create a balanced human being, not just a fighter and a badass.
Well, I think that's, the superhero you played in Spawn, that movie is so apart from the kinds of, it's sort of like the dark DC universe sort of seems to reach for the darkness of what Spawn was in the 1990s. And your character is just so riddled with moral dilemma, that entire movie. Like, the struggle of Spawn is not a physical one, despite him being a magnificent physical specimen. It is like this battle between his soul and hell and losing people he loves. Right. Well, and when did the, as you mentioned, like the heart of an artist and the sensitive side of you, like when did the heart of an artist start pulling at you to like lead to, was that what led to screen career? Was that like, well, I have to exercise this and this is the medium that I want to do it in?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like I was faced with reality like later on. I mean, when I look back, I call it like my rosebud moment from, Citizen Kane, basically. Yeah. Like in third and fourth grade, I was doing puppet shows for the class. That I'd create the puppets and I'd create the whole show and did the voices and everything. Mm-hmm. When I was 10, I was shooting my own little Super 8 movies, and I was doing this like naturally. And when I was a teenager, I was doing these things and I was creating these narratives. Now, I get older and I think, I'm supposed to be a computer science. I got to do the things that make sense, right brain fighting left brain. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, okay, go into law, go into things that make sense. But you know what? While I'm in college, I'm gonna do these acting classes because at least I'll have fun doing that. Not realizing, dude, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You know, I mean, I get out of school, I become a school teacher. I was a special ed teacher. But then, you know, I'm going to go audition for these roles in New York on my time off. It's like to where it's like reality, like hit me in the face going, dude, man, you're always finding time to do this other stuff that's really in your heart. But never realizing, because I hadn't met really any actors in my life. But these things were, you know, it just led me to my truth. And then I realized I have to get this out of my system. I have to, you know, look over here, even though it doesn't seem to make logical sense. Yeah. So, you know, that's like betting your life on the lottery in my mind. And since I wasn't the guy with the purple hair and that was saying, please pay attention to me all the time, like a lot of the actors I, you know, encountered, I thought I don't have what it takes to become an actor. No, I had more than what it takes, because it was about that balance, you know? Yeah. So that's when I realistically, you know, when I started going out for things and realizing that my perspective was not that far off, and that I did have talent in this industry, that I said, oh man, I'm so glad I ended up, you know, following my heart. Yeah.
Well, and then it was in 1995 that the HBO film Tyson came out, and you played Mike Tyson in that. And I feel like, you know, with these, Jim Brown is like a transcendent, like larger than life figure. Like Jim Brown, the football player, the screen celebrity, the legacy. Like he's one of those things that just sort of spans so many conversations that he can't be sort of categorized in one box. And then you have Mike Tyson, who was a phenomenon. Like you have this. And there's a conversation in the beginning of that movie. I was just watching it again, where that's like, you know, and I was watching an interview that you had given where you're talking about it's with Vlad TV, and you guys were talking about how like there hasn't been like a main event heavyweight fighter in so long, like not one of those ones where the culture sort of stops and reorients itself around this figure that, like, even boxing, not necessarily everybody's tuning into a match, but you know who Mike Tyson is, you know who Joe Frazier is, kind of thing. And so I was Tyson kind of any kind of turning point for you being in that? Because he seems to sort of, there seems to be a through line in sort of the figure of Mike Tyson to these sort of powerful, incredibly charismatic, complicated figures that you were really drawn to when you were watching movies when you were young.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tyson, I mean, that was a major launching point for my career, of course. It was a rare situation, because here I'm playing somebody who's the same age as me, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Which never happens. Usually you're playing somebody old or dead, you know? Yeah. And so if I had gotten it wrong, it would be in front of everybody. And so the fact that that was critically acclaimed, and some of Tyson's friends himself, you know, came to me, like, still to my greatest compliment came from Eddie Murphy, who was a good friend of Mike Tyson, who admitted to me on the set of Nutty Professor. He said, man, I wanted to hate that movie because Mike is a good friend of mine. But when I saw it, I thought this guy was great. Wow. That was the most bizarre moment, because and not to get too deep in it, but a buddy of mine who was the storyboard artist brought me to that set. He was a storyboard artist on that set, and he didn't warn me that Eddie Murphy was in a fat suit. And so, okay. All I know.
So do you have this conversation with Eddie Murphy while he was dressed as one of the?
Yes, I had no idea. I had no idea I was talking to Eddie Murphy. There's some fat guys talking to me and saying that, you know, he wanted to dislike my my portrayal of Mike Tyson because he was a friend of his, but he shook my hand and I felt the foam. You know, because the fat hand was foamy. And I'm like, okay, what? And I realized the voice coming out of the fat guy was Eddie Murphy's
what voice. Circus funhouse am I in right now?
And then my friend didn't even because it was sworn to secrecy. So this is a year before the movie comes out.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
But yeah, so when I got that still to this day is the greatest compliment of my work. Because if somebody doesn't want to like you and likes you, that's got to be the best, you know?
That does. You really won him over. You really won him over on that one.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't, I'm glad I didn't like look away going, like, who's this, who's this guy?
Like, who's this just random telling, like, thank you?
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad I won you over, sir?
Yeah.
Anonymous sir?
Right.
Well, I'm coming down to the end of my time with you. So I guess the question I kind of wanted to wrap up with was, like, you talking about how, you feel like, you're like, you know what? I work hard enough in all these other avenues to where the work itself of the job doesn't feel hard, because, like, you feel like the work you do is really representative of yourself. And it sounds like, your efforts to work at sort of balance and perspective, like, prepare you into the where, like, the work is kind of done by the time you get there and then you can execute. And so I wondered, like, is among your many roles, do you feel like one has most specifically sort of captured Michael Jai White, even knowing that your roles tend to, like, truthfully, honestly reflect you? Is there one where you're like, this one really particularly, they might as well have just called my character Michael Jai White? Like, that might as well have been literally me up on the screen.
That's happened so few times. It was a series I did called Wonderland a long time ago, where I played the attending physician in an ER, but that was a series. But honestly, there's a role that I've really played myself. And actually, when I was casting this role, basically Oz Scott, who's one of the main directors in a TV series that I just completed the first season of, he says, we just want you. We want you to be you. And I was like, what a luxury! I can play. And there's the series I just wrapped called Kingdom Business, where I play a character named Caesar, who's the character that they kind of constructed was based. They really wanted me to play me. So that's rare that I can play me. I've usually played, these kind of, I don't know, like stoic characters in the past, or Black Dynamite is like an amped up version, like, but that's kind of closer to me in a way, even though it's, it seems weird, but I'm a goof. Every serious movie you've ever seen me do, believe it, that before that camera rolled or after that camera rolled, I was doing something silly.
Okay.
And there is a silly version of whatever that serious movie is that's probably, on the outtakes.
Right. Were you stoked then to, like, do True North with Insecure? You were like, oh yeah, we're going to have a good time on set today.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to be, I see things in comedy. I'm always writing comedy in my head.
Interesting. All right.
And I actually, so like with Outlaw Johnny Black, which is my new Western, one that's like a follow-up to Black Dynamite, that's me in my element. Really, it's about, I'd love to do a lot more action comedy.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be, it's just that I've gotten to where I've, to where I am.
Yeah.
On certain things, but when I have my druthers, you see, I'm doing things like Black Dynamite.
Well, you've done so much in your career. I look forward to the comedic action future that we could get from Michael Jai White, because now that I know that, that's all I want to see. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I so appreciate your input. I so appreciate your time. And I so appreciate you letting me know that we all now need to work together to manifest your action comedy future going forward, following The Commando. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's a real honor to get to, after all these years, finally get to talk to you.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you as well. Look forward to the next time.
That was Michael Jai White, everybody. I said it in the conversation. I've been wanting to talk to this man for years. I've been a fan of this man for years. He is out there on that DTV movie grind. If you say in this world that their action movies are samey now and everything looks like a candy-colored Marvel bomb, you're wrong, you're incorrect. You lack curiosity and the skill of discovery, because there are movies like Michael's that you can go watch. Scott Adkins, I can pour through the list. His new movie is called The Commando, and it's available to watch on VOD. And you can stream that pretty much anywhere online. It might be available in a theater near you. I have not checked to confirm that, honestly. And hey, VOD in the time of COVID, live it up. But today, before we end, I've got to talk about one quick thing before I go. And there's no peg to this, except for the fact that we find ourselves coming up again on an anniversary of sorts, which is the anniversary of Kathy Yan's Birds of Prey releasing into theaters to an insufficient reception. Critically, yes. Critically did very well. For me, personally, it's the best superhero movie, but it came out right on that edge of COVID. Asian markets like in China and South Korea, theaters were closing because of the scare. And then in the United States, it didn't necessarily perform up to superhero standards. And there was all this like bullshit narrative when it came out about like, well, if only it had been rated PG-13, then the young girls it was meant for could have all gone to the theaters and seen it. That's garbage. Sorry, Deadpool made $1 billion goddamn dollars and set like release records for the month that it came out. Then Deadpool 2 came out and like was pretty much a repeat of the same kind of success. And no one was like, you know what? It could have made $2 billion though if Deadpool had been rated PG-13, though they did go on to release a PG-13 cut just as a cash grab. You know, if only it had been rated PG-13, then all the teen boys it was meant for could have had access to it like they didn't in the theaters. Sexist garbage. Birds of Prey. I say, like, every February, we would just make it like Birds of Prey month, and everybody who knows the truth of that movie shows up again and is like, let's rent this. Even if you own it, rent it again just to prove a point. And because, you know what? I watched The Suicide Squad, the wonderfully fun James Gunn take on The Suicide Squad that came out, gosh, what was that, last year? It's so much fun. It's so good. And Harley Quinn, once again, the beating heart and soul of a Suicide Squad movie, and Margot Robbie just embodying this role so fabulously in such a madcap way. She's such a gifted physical performer. People who really watch and pay attention, they do sing her praises in the way that she deserves for being such a deft physical presence on screen. She is known for doing like a pretty fair portion of her own stunts. She just adapts very well to very physical roles. She did a ton of the skating actually in I, Tonya. She's just kind of got it like that. It's a tool in her toolkit. And you just watched that head to toe, hairline to the bottom of her shoes, gleeful psychopath with a heart of gold performance that Margot Robbie gives you. And it's like, you know what? Maybe Birds of Prey didn't quite do what it needed to do to get that auto green light from Warner Brothers. The Suicide Squad tumbled out of the gate strong and did dollars for the DC enterprise. So let's combine what we know, which is that the people want more Harley Quinn. They want more Margot Robbie, Harley Quinn. So give us that Birds of Prey sequel. Put her back together with the Black Canary and the Huntress, and give us that bisexual catastrophe great time action comedy that is a Harley Quinn action film. More Birds of Prey. Yeah, that's my completely non sequitur rant for today, because I'm just so passionate about it, and I have an always renewed sense of purpose to tell you that you missed out if you didn't see it, and you owe us one, so now you got to make it up to us. So that is it. That is the end of the show for today. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/FeelingSeenPod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorkru on Twitter at JORCRU, talking about Yellow Jackets. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.